Well, good morning. Welcome to our first broadcast in October. We've definitely seen a change in the weather since the page on the calendar turned. Hopefully, we still will have some nice autumn days ahead. You know, all the talk in Lansing this week has been about the state budget. We'll get an update on that and other issues, and it starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, with time running out, the Republican majority in the Michigan House and Senate pushed through their version of a state's budget for the fiscal year that started on October 1st. Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer did not agree with many aspects of the budget, and while she signed the bill to keep state government operating, she also used a record number of line item vetoes and other administrative changes that amount to nearly $1 billion. That process is still ongoing. This morning we'll get a Democratic perspective on the budget and other issues from 109th District State Representative Sarah Cambenzi. Representative Cambenzi, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
Thank you.
It's an interesting time in Lansing, isn't it?
It is.
You know, go ahead.
Very lively. Lots of negotiations still going on behind the scenes. Certainly some disappointment, but even though I think the Republican side feels that the governor kind of went ahead, used her veto pen very vividly and widely, a lot of our priority projects got cut too. So really what is going on right now is it's forcing everyone back to the table.
You have more than a couple of years under your belt now, so as far as Michigan legislators go, you're like an old pro, but was it different this year, with a divided government, the Democratic governor, Republican legislature?
I think it is. I think one of the things that I noticed right away is that there's more of a willingness to work on bills and legislation, which is a good thing. Not so good thing, I think, because the Republicans have had the majority in all three chambers, executive, House, and Senate for 8 years. This is a big change for them, and when it comes to the budget and when it comes to sitting down and fighting over a very small amount of money that we actually have control to use and manipulate, that's where you're seeing the roadblocks.
When it comes to the budget bills, you can't pick and choose. You can only vote yes or no on each bill.
Correct.
How did you vote on the bills that were passed?
I think, two bills, knowing that we weren't going to get anywhere with additional revenue. It was decided back in early September that the 45-cent gas tax is off the table. Also, bonding on the back of pensions was off the table, and both the Republican majority leaders and the governor said we're going to work on road funding for a long-term fix after the budget. And once that was off the table, I think we knew there was no new revenue coming in, so it was very easy for me to say, yes, I want to vote for an increase in education funding. Yes, I want to vote for our state police budget. But other budgets like DHHS, where there is a provision to actually, begin to privatize our mental health services, I wasn't a fan of. Looking at corrections, where they actually cut money that was encumbered to be spent on projects going forward. Constitutionally, we can't do that. The Secretary of State, I think that was another one where I said, wait a minute, you're taking out general fund dollars and putting in restricted funds in order to lower the amount that is able to go towards the redistricting commission. And there were things like that I just felt were undercutting the will of the people, but also what we can and can't do legally.
So, as I said, as a legislator, not just you, but every member, you can either vote aye or nay.
Right.
You can't say, well, I like this part, I like that part.
Right.
But the governor kind of can, and that's really what she's doing, isn't it?
Yep.
And even she has some very strong limitations there.
Yes, absolutely.
But the veto pen has made some. Let's talk about some of those things.
Yeah.
Her main campaign issue and her main issue through the year has been fixing the roads.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, that's something that, there were some discussions going on for a while.
Yeah.
But it appears they kind of fell apart.
I think, when you ask my colleagues, what are we focused on when we look at road funding, I think we've sat back and said, is everyone paying their fair share? We look at states like Minnesota and Wisconsin, which a lot of constituents come up to me and say, gosh, they have great roads, what are they doing? Our budget this year in Michigan was proposed to be $59 billion. Minnesota's budget, they have about half as many people living there as we do in Michigan. Their budget is is roughly 48 billion. So the amount of taxes we pay matters, but my side is saying who pays matters. And one thing that we were adamant that we wanted to get on the table was, can we raise that corporate tax break back up to where it was in 2010? It would be a 2.5 increase. It would be anywhere from 500 million to 600 million. That could actually get us to take that school aid funding out of the sales tax at the pump, so that that money could go towards roads, and we're backfilling education. And just to start there, you know, no gas tax on the public, no increased taxes on the individuals or families. But can corporations, the biggest ones in Michigan, not our small ones, pay their fair share? And I think that's where we want to start the conversation after the budget.
And that's really where all these issues come down, don't they?
Yep.
You know, $60 billion is a lot of money.
Right.
But there's not much room to move when you pay for everything you have to pay.
Not at all.
And so it really becomes an issue of, do you get more revenue, or do you just keep moving these
Right.
dollars around?
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
What do you think is going to happen as we go forward?
You know, I think that there's going to have to be some concessions from Republicans. A lot of them have taken a no tax pledge. You know, a lot of people think that's good. They're not going to raise my taxes, but what it also means is they're not willing to look at, again, you know, who's paying their fair share. You know, another thing I've been frustrated about, a lot of my colleagues have been frustrated about, is the dark store tax issue, and you know, letting the tax tribunal kind of make up its own tax code and make the rules up about this and find these loopholes. You know, this is something my side is going to push hard on, and again, Representative LaFave and Senator McBroom have those bills, haven't been able to move them within their own caucus, and I think you're going to see us start pushing on them really hard to either deal with it or have us come up with bills and try and run those.
Okay, we'll talk more about this and some other things in just a couple of minutes. Back with more on today's Ryan Report 2 minutes from now. Talking this morning with State Representative Sarah Cambenzi. All the budget issues are going on in Lansing, even as we're talking. Before I leave the roads, is the 45-cent gas tax dead?
It is.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen, and honestly, that was put forward as, here's the amount of money we need, here's one extreme way we can get there. But I think what the governor expected was to get back counter proposals from the Republicans, and what came back was not popular with the public. Bonding on, you know, teacher pensions, you know, that was widely unpopular. They did polling on that. Selling one-time assets like, you know, the bridge between Canada and Port Huron, not popular. And the last one was letting some roads go back to gravel. So nothing really came to fruition in terms of a counter agreement coming from the Republicans that was taken seriously. And I think given this next year, we'll have a lot more time to hash some of these things out. One
place where there was bipartisan support on budget bills was in the education budget.
Yeah.
And Republicans and Democrats seemed to pretty much agree on what was decided.
Yep. And we know that there are a lot of line item vetoes for special projects within education. The governor has actually line item vetoed and said, I want a lot of this money to go back to the classroom, which is good. But overall, when you can get a $240 increase per pupil, with the market area public schools alone, that's about $750,000 into their general fund for the next operating year. That's a lot of money. So it's hard to vote against that. For our universities, same thing. You know, they're facing 100% for the Native American tuition reimbursement program. That with a more generous cap that came from the Senate budget means that Northern Michigan University is actually doing pretty good.
Although the higher education budget was quite a bit lower than the governor had recommended, right?
It is, but again, I think her recommendations were on, you know, based on having new revenue to look at as well, and we didn't get there with the gas tax or any other proposal.
Does this get us where you think we should be in K-12 education? I mean, it's a sizable increase considering where we've been, but does it get pay raises for teachers and technology we need and smaller class sizes and the goals that some people have for education?
Yeah, spending 10 years working for the public schools, I think it gets us closer. but we're still in the bottom third of states in terms of our funding for K-12. So if you ask anyone that works in the schools, I mean, they'll tell you they've cut as much as they can cut. And right now, you know, we don't give out the generous pensions. Healthcare, everyone's paying for a lot more. They've made all the concessions, but going forward with technology, it's more expensive to educate our kids. And so, you know, that's a lot of the reason why a lot of us support more funding for those schools.
And we are seeing less interest in the teaching profession.
Absolutely.
You know, quite a change from when it was hard to get a teaching job
Yep.
to now it's getting harder to find good teachers, I guess.
Right, you know, and it's not just teaching. We've gotten considerable calls lately from corrections officers. Very challenging when you look at the job they have to do day in and day out, the population they work with. They're having problems finding people that want to go in it. And now there's a divide between those that have pensions and those that are coming in with 401ks. There's not much incentive for them to stay when the economy's good and they can pick other jobs.
The governor had proposed some scholarships for community college and for four-year institutions as well. Did any of that survive in this budget?
It didn't, and a lot of that was based on new revenue, again, that we just didn't get to. So when I look at the budget in terms of, you know, did she get a lot of these programs? Are we going to be able to do a lot of things she's talked about this last year? Probably not, but it's a good test run going into this next year.
We know that education is going to be critically important, not just education, but job training going forward for Michigan and for the country. Yeah, are we on the right track? Are we moving in the right direction in those areas?
I think we need to invest more, especially being a state that was so heavy, you know, dependent on our manufacturing jobs. We need to train and retrain our workers to do the jobs of the 21st century. You know, I like to tell the story when I got to go and try and drive a bulldozer on one of the career apprenticeship days. And I got in and I thought there's going to be a clutch and, you know, a shift, and you turn the key on and everything was digitalized. And I got in there and I froze and I said, I don't know what to do. So, you know, I think it's different from someone like me in their 40s who might have been trained on older equipment, different types of machinery, going into these new jobs where technology has advanced the workforce and the workplace. We do need to invest and make sure that people aren't left behind.
Okay, we'll talk about some other things other than money issues.
Okay.
Just a couple of minutes. Back with more on today's show in just 2 minutes from now. Okay, this morning we're talking with State Representative Sarah Cambenzi. Well, you had some real success this year with a mining bill. Tell us about that.
Yes, I was glad to see that passed. Again, there was only one legislator that voted against it, and I think being able to talk to him and explain it more, he understands the importance of it. But that,
before we jump over that, that's pretty amazing in itself.
That is,
only
yes.
one person voting against it.
Yes, and you know, I was more concerned about what would my caucus think. Again, we have a lot of people who are very focused on the environment. Mining isn't something that, you know, is really understood if you don't have it in your district. And so being able to work with my colleagues over 4 months and explain that, you know, it's not just mining things out of the ground, it's how do we recycle metal? What kinds of metal do we need to make electric vehicles? The latest, you know, heart monitoring stuff, valves, things like that that can help people live longer. And once we explained it and talked about it, you know, they saw a path where they could get behind it and kind of sing its importance.
Specifically, what will this bill provide now? There's a committee will be appointed?
Right, so the governor will appoint this committee either later this week or next week of individuals around our state who have a background in mining to come together and really give guidance on where do we want to go for the next 10, 20 or 50 years. And you know, seeing what a state like Minnesota did early on back in 2004 to invest and bring these people together to keep the legislature informed, you know, they've been able to really do things above and beyond what just the market kind of dictates. So they've been able to work with companies and say, you know what, we're going to have an environmental fund, and if you want to do a project that helps take care of our environment, we'll match that funding back with some of the taxes you paid in. They're doing the same thing with an equipment fund, as well as a fund that goes back into research at their universities. So we want to take some of that and implement it here, but also look at, what is the future of aggregates, gravel mines, sand pits. As they become more controversial, what is the best way to deal with local zoning? Is it to keep it local? Some people want to bring that in at the state level. So there's going to be a lot of discussions that impact people in their backyards. And I hope people pay attention. Again, it's only advisory. We don't have the right to make legislation, but we will be making recommendations to the governor.
A couple other issues. Enbridge Line 5 continues to be an issue.
Yes.
Some people want to see it closed down. Others feel the tunnel is a good solution. What do you think?
Yeah, I've always been a supporter of the tunnel. Knowing that we really started building this infrastructure of pipelines in our country about 80 years ago, to rebuild this, to shut it off, it isn't a solution. I think if we want to work towards getting away from fossil fuels, looking at fuel efficiency, it's a much better way to kind of deal with oil versus just shutting a pipeline off and thinking people are going to not use it or there's not going to be oil spills. So seeing Governor Blanchard come out a few days ago and say, I understand that it's a sensitive issue, but it really is the best option. I think more people are coming on board and saying it might not be ideal, but to be able to actually separate it and put it so far in the bedrock under there and create a utility corridor, which in the UP we need desperately for broadband, connecting our infrastructure with electricity. All of that stuff is going to be huge for what we can do with our economy up here. We've been waiting for this. So going forward, I still stand by it as getting the current line out of there and protecting the environment.
Another positive thing going on is the Great Lakes Sports Commission.
Yes.
This is a one-time $10 million
Yes.
fund that came from the legislature last year.
Yep.
And now they're beginning to put it in place. Are you pleased with the directions they're heading in?
I am, and it took a while. Again, it was Representative Dianda and I at the time that had to go into our caucus and tell people what ski jumping was, why it's important, the history, but also what these winter sports can attract. I mean, we know that in the summer we have about a million or so people coming through different communities to go and tour things. But really in the winter, other than snowmobiling, what can we attract people to the UP for? And I think this is a great way to say, here's part of our heritage, but if we can bring people from all over the world to some of these ski jumps, a $10 million boost will help us do that.
Right. Our time is up. Thanks for coming in. You have
Thank you.
some tough weeks ahead of you. Good luck
We
with
do.
that. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. I'll be back with some other thoughts for you in just a couple of minutes. I've explained my theory before that our brain is like the hard drive on a computer. It just keeps storing up old and oftentimes useless information until one day, like a computer, it gets filled up and doesn't have room to store anything new, which provides a logical explanation for why we remember things from 50 years ago but can't recall what we had for dinner last night. It also helps us to understand why we might find ourselves humming a song one day that we haven't thought about for 20 years, or in my case, remembering a commercial from the early days of television. The other day for me, it was a commercial for Brylcreem that came bouncing into my head. Brylcreem was a men's hairstyling product. If you're old enough to remember, you might remember their catchy jingle. Brylcreem, a little dab will do you. Brylcreem, you look so debonair. Brylcreem, the gals will all pursue you. They love to get their fingers in your hair. Of course, they sing it in the commercial, but I've spared you that. In any case, remembering Brylcreem got me thinking about some other products that have come and gone. Some had a fairly short life and were based on ideas that probably weren't that great to start with. For example, New Coke. Why, when you have what is the best brand name in the world, would you tamper with that success? New Coke was a colossal flop. Consumers reacted so poorly to the new drink that Coca-Cola pulled it from shelves after a few months. But there were other ideas that may have seemed to make sense to the companies that brought them out. You know, in 2000, Heinz introduced green ketchup in squirt bottles that were targeted at kids. Initially, it was successful with a purple shade and blue ketchup introduced later. However, by 2006, kids had tired of the product and the colors were discontinued. All I can say is that for me, it was a bad idea from the start. Green ketchup, what will we have next? Red mustard? There were a lot of other things that have come and gone. Remember when we had dial telephones? They were the height of modern technology. How about when grocery stores gave you S&H green stamps with your purchase? And I'm guessing not many of us had the experience, but at one time you could fly from New York to London in 3 hours on the supersonic Concorde, which has now gone the way of green ketchup. But of all of them, my favorite memory is the McDLT from McDonald's. If you remember, the packaging was the key. It came in a 2-part styrofoam container with the meat and one half the bun on one side and the lettuce, tomato, cheese, and the other half of the bun on the other. When you ate it, you put the halves together, and the warm stuff was warm and the cold ingredients were cold. You just have to wonder how excited they were when they came up with that idea. Actually, it stayed around for about 6 or 7 years, then it was gone. And get this, the McDLT was eventually succeeded by the McLean Deluxe. Do you have that one in your memory bank? I'll be back in a minute. Time to say goodbye for another Sunday. Keep Upper Michigan's Source.com in mind for the latest news anytime and for a rebroadcast of this show each week. Thanks to Representative Ken Benzie for being here this morning to bring us up to date on what's happening in the state capitol. And thank you for joining us. I hope we can get together again next Sunday morning.